Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just want to quilt. So today we have a super famous quilter. Alex Anderson is with us. I am so beyond excited. You all probably know her from HGTV, maybe. She also is the founding partner of the Quilt-Show with Ricky Timms. That is a online full-service interactive video TV show with all kinds of other stuff with over 140,000 members. Unbelievable. Anyway, she sat down with us, and her husband pops in too, towards the middle-ish, endish, and we were super psyched to talk with her. I'm really thrilled. This is a big moment for the podcast, and so here is Alex. A quick note. Just before we were to begin, I was not at home and we were traveling, and the headset microphone stopped working. So my sound is a little bit weird on my side. It's just a little bit fuzzy, but you can hear Alex, and it's really all about Alex anyway. So sorry again about the sound. It was so frustrating. Anyway, here it goes.
I'm Alex Anderson, and I'm calling from Livermore, California. We're about 45 minutes east of San Francisco.
Very awesome. All right, so we asked the first question of everyone, what is your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
I remember Mrs. Kelly, who's a lawyer now, was our next door neighbor. And when I was a little girl, I would go sit under her quilt frame when she was quilting. And for 8th grade graduation, she gave me a silver thimble.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah, so it's probably my first recollection of that.
And then your story, I mean, a lot of people know your story, but just in case someone doesn't, that they're happening upon you for the first time, which is, I don't really know how that could be, but just in case. When did you start quilting, and why did you start quilting?
So I actually have been sewing since about 6th grade, but 1 month prior to graduation at San Francisco State, I found out I was a unit short, and I am a generic art major, but I had just done a paper on quilting as an American folk tradition, actually for a children's class, children development class, and I interviewed a gal in Livermore named Dee Wilson, and that was my first expose into quilting. When I found out I was this unit short, I said to my counselor, what if I finish a quilt that my grandma started in the 30s and it tied in with this other project? And my counselor said, sure, why not? And I thought I'd end up with, queen size quilt, whatever. I ended up with a bath mat, but I thought I was going to be a weaver for life, and quilting just kind of grabbed me. But I've always been intrigued with sewing, always.
So why does quilting grab people? It is a hobby that turns into people's passion, that turns into some people's career in ways I haven't really seen in other. It's a bit weird, right? Like, people get really obsessed with this.
Well, we are a different group. I mean, when I describe myself, I'm just like a normal person, and I live in a neighborhood, and people just think I'm the lady that's a little weird about quilting. I think because it's an evolving craft, and I don't get bored with it at all, because there's always something new coming around the turn. And lately, I've been enjoying taking classes more than teaching. So I want to learn.
Okay, so tell me more about that, because I think people would be really surprised that you would be taking classes. So tell me why you take classes and what you get out of it when you take the class. How do you approach a class when you're so advanced and you've done so much?
I'm not that advanced. That's the thing. I take a class, I sit in the corner, and I behave myself. So if you ever see me in your class and you're a professional, don't worry about it. I think if I think there's going to be any issue, I will ask the teacher's permission, but I don't put myself out as the expert. I mean, I literally sit in a corner and might even put music buds in just so you know, and I've really changed a lot as a quilt maker because of that. There's so much out there.
How important do you think, so I was going to ask this later, but what do you think sort of the role of so you've done everything, right? You write books and on TV and on the Quilt TV, your own thing that's 140,000 people, probably more since that was written.
Mm-hmm.
You've done everything. What do you think the role of the in-person class is versus the online sort of space is? Sort of how do they work if you're listening to, if people are listening to that?
Well, I don't think everybody's as fortunate as where I live, okay? I don't think there's anything that beats taking a class with other people, because I know when I teach, there's 10,000 different scenarios that can happen when you're making a quilt, and you can't teach all of that. But in a classroom situation, you can take advantage of the issues people might be having and teach to the better of the group, you know? But online, what online has provided is quilting, connecting quilters worldwide. And I think that's a fairly new phenomenon. I mean, sure, we might fly over to England and do something over there, but that's for people who have the means to do that and all that. So I think it has broadened the quilting world.
Yeah, so I think what's so interesting about it is that it allows, like some people talk about the quilting industry shrinking. They're worried that there's less quilters. Do you find that? I mean, I'm amazed at the Facebook groups and, you know, quilting, with the amount of people you have on Quilt TV. Like, there's a lot of people in this system.
There's a lot, yeah, there's a lot of people. I think the good news is that new people are coming in and younger people. I think the modern movement has really reached to that, because my group, I mean, I was kind of like the baby in my group, and those people are passing on. So, I mean, we must be bringing in new people. I think the internet's great for that, because the whole generation, it's all about, well, Google, what can I find, right? I think is what people might be feeling is that, say, perhaps 15 years ago, everybody was going to open a quilt shop. There was going to be another fabric manufacturer. It just became so big that it kind of cannibalized itself. And so I think there's a natural settling out that's happening.
That's really interesting.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think that the internet I think those that are doing the internet, those that are like what you're doing, I see Crafty Gemini, Leah Day, all of these people, that's the new leading group of quilting, and they're bringing along people. They feel connected to them. They have fan bases that are so important to this. I think they're really there, and they all started around that same time, 2008, that sort of period. Tula Pink, Mary Fons, like all of them that are now like that next generation.
That's interesting that you can put a date on it. That's real interesting to me.
Yeah, 2006, 2007, 2008. Every time, even Jenny Jones, we interviewed her. When do you begin? 2008. So there's this kind of 10 years later, like the impact of those people is, you see it really significantly, right?
Right. Well, Jenny Doan's story, I mean, I've met her a couple times. That is just incredible what she has done. I mean, it blows my mind, you know? And I mean, and in the middle of nowhere, she built this town.
Yeah, and they're all the quilt tourism, the amount that every day. They have like 16 shops. I don't remember how many shops, but a lot of shops.
Yeah.
The story is remarkable. But I think you see that even with the Crafty Gemini, Leah Day, all these others, where they build, you know, you felt, I don't know how many, Leah told me, but like 120,000 books because she was like online. Like, I mean, like these are like people just in their house, like doing something that suddenly makes them into, and that's what
right.
Is it allowed for that direct,
well, it's instantaneous. Yeah. And I know, okay, we started the quilt show in 2007, come to think of it. Yeah, 2007. And that was like pushing a rope uphill. I mean,
so interesting, right?
And what we say now is, I guess we're into it almost 12 years. And it's like those 12 years ago is like 100 years ago in real time, because things have evolved. Any change?
Yeah, right? It's really, I mean, the industry is changing in this incredible, it's already changed. It's now got to catch up with what it is. And so I think that that's where you see the tension a little bit. So
Yeah.
that's what I've so far. But it's interesting to sort of see it all, like to be immersed like that and to talk to people like you, which is so thrilling. So I think it's very interesting. Now, I think what's really interesting is you're like one of our empire builders. You built an empire, and it's incredible.
It's not really. It's a smoke and
mirrors, right?
smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors. My employee's asleep in a basket on my table over there.
Awesome. That's very good. I like that. That's very good. How do you think, I mean, how do you become you? Like, how do you, like, I know your story, so I'm not really, that's not it. But, like, what is it? That how does that happen, you know?
I think, okay, this is what I found with Simply Quilts back in the day. People would, well, when I got offered the TV show on HGTV, let's just start with that. I didn't get offered it, but I got, you know, are you interested? Do you want to fly down and talk to us? And I'm like, I said to my husband, John, I said, I don't really think I want to do that. And I just want to travel and teach. That's all I want out of this whole thing. And he said to me, I've never seen you walk away from anything. You've always walked through the door. I am willing to walk through the door and fall on my face, and I don't care because I just love the craft. I want to share the craft. Building an empire, I mean, that implies that I've got all this. I really don't. I'm just the goof at the right place at the right time, and not to diminish it because I've never done it for money, for anything like that. I just know how profound quilting is in my personal life.
I love that. And I think that, Sue, I mean, clearly you work hard. Like, it doesn't just, like, things don't just, like, but I like that idea that still at the core is that, I hear that a lot.
I love it. I will tell you, if okay, this is going to come out a little weird, but I think it's important to say. I mean, it is a female industry for the most part. If I were a man and I loved golfing, I'd be a bazillionaire. It is not a well-paid industry. There are only a few people who have really made a lot of money, and I can only guess who they are. And I think it's because it is a women's industry for the most part.
So you see that as the economics that we're just not valued the way we need to be valued.
No, and I mean, I don't want to. You've got to do it for the love of it, because if not, you're going to be so disappointed. You're not going to be able to stand it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get along. I mean, I put my kids through college, you know, so that's all great. So I'm not complaining, but it's not this big giant empire. I mean, I can guess who the empires are, but I'd just be guessing. And I kind of like just do my own thing. But when I say I'll do it, I'll do it. When I'm presented an opportunity, I don't walk away from it unless I think it's ridiculous. But I'm up for any challenge, anything. Let's do it.
It's really interesting. It's so interesting, isn't it? Like, so how does that change? How does the industry have to change? Or does it change? Is that just part of the industry? Do you feel like the economic side of it is out of balance, or it is just the nature of it? Like, I don't really know.
I don't know. But I know when I got started, okay, so this is kind of a weird thing, and I'm throwing weird stuff out there, okay? When I got started, and a lot of quilters, they go to guilds, okay? Guilds are nonprofit. Typically, they're run by women. I don't want to pigeonhole that because, I mean, obviously, I work with Ricky Timms and John Flynn's my friend and all that, but typically it's run by women, and they're very, very frugal. They're very, very frugal. So let's start with that. Right. I can remember with one company, I'm not going to say who, they had the women share the rooms at Houston, but the men got their own rooms. And I said,
really? Like, really? Right?
Well, I brought it up and I got my own room.
You did?
Yeah.
We'll take care of you because then you'll stop complaining.
Yeah. You know, and it's like, are you sharing a room? Well, then don't make me share a room, you know? So, I mean, but I think a lot of it is also women trying to please. And again, I'm not trying to pull this away from the men, but if you want to be honest about it, probably being generous, 80% are women, and that's being generous.
And that's generous, right? Totally, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I think that's really interesting is that where is the money? So when I get to like,
show me the money.
Where is the money? So there's a gargantuan. Is it just because the manufacturing process is expensive? Like, where is the money in publishing and fabric? And like, I can't find where.
I can't find it. I can't find it. I said and I mean, we are going through a whole economic thing now and rebuilding of the industry. One fabric manufacturer said to me, I am working 10 times harder. This was the president of one of the companies. I'm working 10 times harder and making 10 times less. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, real interesting.
Right. That just now, who we are at this point.
Now, in the olden days, I would go into a quilt store and I would just buy fabric. I would just hoard and buy fabric. And it's my understanding that that's not really the practices of the newer generation. They create a project in their mind and then they go and buy the fabric. I don't know if that's true or not, but that alone would make a pretty big difference.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. The stash building is a problem. We need to encourage stash building, I guess.
Yeah, and I encourage people to, if you have, this is my rule. If I'm looking for something specific, okay? Yeah. I live in a very rich area of quilters. I mean, there's so many quilters, so many quilt shops. I will call the different shops, and I'm willing to get in the car and drive up to an hour I probably have 8 to 10 quilt shops I could go to. Wow. If they don't have it, then I'll give myself permission to get it online.
So you're trying to support the local quilt
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because in the beginning, that's who grew me and bred me as a professional quilt maker.
Right. So we need them around, right?
Yep.
Go to Best Buy, buy your TV there. Don't, there's only ones left. So if you don't support your local quilt shop, then we will.
They're going to be bye-bye. They're going to be bye-bye. So.
And they're struggling. I mean, like, everybody's struggling. It's so bizarre to me. Like I want somebody to be like, I am not struggling. Like, I want to know who that person is.
Well, no, I'm going to tell you, I'm not struggling because my kids are out of college. I'm just fine.
You're fine.
I'm fine. My role,
right.
But I was really lucky. This is something else that's very different. Well, compared to the women who are doing it now, I was fortunate to be a stay-at-home mom. So whatever I made kind of went to my own sport. And then when it became college time, that's when I got Simply Quilts, and that put my kids through college. So that was a miracle, an absolute miracle. My husband, John, and many people in the industry know him, saw what was going on online at the quilt show and said, if somebody doesn't really take it over, it's going to sink. And he was right. And so he said, I think I'm thinking about quitting my job. And he's a CPA. And I said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, first you have to ask my dad's permission. I mean, talk about old school. And he asked my dad's permission. And my dad thought about it in 24 hours and said, I think it's the best blank, blank, blank idea you've had in a long time. The kids were done with college. The composition of his job had changed greatly. And he asked his brother. His brother talked to him a day later and said, do it. If you guys can work together, do it. So he did quit. We're fine. But I think that's the rare story, not the rule.
And it's an internet story, which is so interesting, right? So
yeah.
We see Modern Society. We see Crafty Gemini. We see Leah Day. We see a whole bunch of others. I could name 5 or 6 others that are doing that same thing. They're the personality. It gets to a point where they need support. Their husband then comes in as support for that, and it becomes this thing. And it's a story that's being told over and over again, which I think is really interesting. And then those that don't have that support, a bit more struggle, because
it's a struggle.
Complicated, right? It's hard. And I imagine with your schedule, I can't imagine, right? Like, it's just a lot. There's a lot to do. There's a lot. So let me ask you, related to that, building a brand. So you are such a brand, right? You are a thing. You're such a thing. What role does right of publicity and sort of how you endorse things and where you go, how do you manage that? And how is it to become a thing like that?
Well, it's different. It's different now than it was for me. And it was the TV show. It just happened. And to think I was going to walk away from it, it just blows my mind. But it's different now. Then you just put one foot in front of the other. And I mean, I have to tell you, I think I am blessed. I am lucky. And I don't take any of this for granted. None of it. Because it just serendipitously happened. And I'm ever so grateful for that. It was nothing intentional at all.
Tell me a little bit about Quilter Select and sort of making of that and sort of what role. Tell me a little bit about that development of, it's a brand, right? It's a brand of that you find and different tools and other things like that. Tell me.
Okay, the first thing you said you cut out. So what do you want me to talk about?
Quilter Select. Tell me a little
Thank
bit
you.
about
Thank you for asking. That, again, was a serendipitous thing. I go away with my girlfriends once a year, just like a lot of quilters do. It started as 3 days, and now it's 8. And we go up to my cabin, and I forgot my fusible. I forgot it. And I'm like going, oh, my gosh, do I want John digging through my sewing room? No. So I called a quilt shop that's like an hour away. And Joan Wolfram was there. Joan Wolfram and Dara Williamson go. And Joan goes, see if they have Floriani Apla stick or something like that. And I said, do you have Floriani? Because I was going to use something else. And they said, yes, we do. And so they sent it to me. And that's a whole story in itself because I don't have a mailbox there. But I got it. And I'd worked with it for 10, 15 minutes. And all other fusibles were in my rearview mirror. Yeah. Gone. And I called them up and I said, I got their number from Sarah Vedler, and I said, I don't know if you know me, but my name is Alex Anderson, and I want to know what we can do to get this excellent product into quilters' hands. And I was in Colorado, and that's where Ricky and Kay Brooks reside. We had a meeting at a Mexican restaurant, and Ricky Brooks kept asking me, what do you want? What do you want? I said, I just want to get this product into quilters' hands. Well, unbeknownst to myself, they were trying to figure out how to get into the quilting industry. They're big in the embroidery. Yeah, and they're two completely different, well, not completely, but they're different worlds. And so our needs as so next thing I know, I'm signing a contract. This is not what I set out to do. I just want quilters to have good stuff. And Ricky is the, the promotion guy, and Kay is the genie that can make all this stuff happen. She started working with me, and we started looking at products within the industry that could be improved. And that's how it started. I wasn't seeking it. And so I've kind of just been lucky,
Right, that's so interesting. Well, and how do you like it now that it's up and running? And
I love those people. I love those people. I love the products. And Kay is so smart. Like our rulers people are going out of their minds over the rulers because they don't slip. And had I done it, I was involved with the face of it, what I wanted the numbers to look like, blah, blah, blah. And she put this no stick stuff on the back, and people are just like out of their minds. So I'm thrilled to be associated with them. And when I met with them at that Mexican restaurant, I said, this is what you need to know. These cannot go into big box stores, only independent stores. And they're completely of like mind, completely like-minded. And the philosophy of the company is different than Floriani. It's all owned by R&K, okay, or under the umbrella. Floriani has Floriana, you have to be like a dealer, kind of like a sewing machine dealer. And they take care of their dealers by giving them territory so they don't cannibalize each other.
Yeah.
But my deal is I want this available to any independent store, period. And they were in complete agreement because like we were talking about earlier, it's not good if we lose quilt shops. It's not good.
We need to protect them.
Yeah.
They feel in competition with the Joann's, the Walmarts, and all of those. And they feel threatened by them because, rightly so, people can go there and get cheaper materials or fabrics and all that. So that's yeah, I get that. Well, that's really great. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And then Brent, I called him Edward Scissorhands. He called me up. I don't even know how he got my phone number, and he said, "This is the best thing that's happened to you in your career, and I know you don't even know it."
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, we're like-minded. We're very like-minded, and that's important.
So interesting. So tell me a little bit about your experience with Quilt TV. You said that it started in 2007?
TheQuiltShow.com.
Yeah. Sorry.
Quilt TV's Mary, I think, right?
I know.
Who's adorable.
She's adorable. She's great. She's awesome. Yeah, so the Quilt Show. So tell me how did you grow that? How did you make it such a thing? Like, that is like amazing, right?
Well, what happened was I called Ricky Timms when my show got canceled about making DVDs, and unbeknownst to myself, Bernina was going to give him a check for a pilot. And so he wanted to know if I'd be interested in playing along with him. And I said, we got to see if we can work together on camera. I mean, that's number one. I flew to La Vida, and within 10 minutes, it was evident we could easily work together. And so we brought Bernina to La Vida, and we pitched this to them. Oh, no, I said to Ricky, why are we doing this on TV? We should be doing it on the internet. Because
and why did you say that? Why? Because you had already had experience on TV. So what was that? That was brilliant, right? Because I imagine it's control.
I've been doing some podcasting too, so that was it. The reason is when.
Wait, I just have to pause you. Do you know that your podcast is still the most popular? You stopped in like 2009. When did you start the podcast? It is still the number one podcast. Just so you know.
What?
This podcast can get above your podcast anywhere. So I just want you to know it's still out there and it's still like number one.
Do you want to know why? The reason I stopped doing it? The reason I stopped, I got an Apple computer and I couldn't figure it out. So anyways, I said to Ricky, why aren't we doing this on the internet? Mm-hmm. And Ricky is very literal. He's a deep thinker. And he looked at me and he goes, and he's very techie. And he goes, okay. And I go, whoa. Let's make a pro and con list. So we went into Justin's office. We spent a day making a pro and con list.
Yeah.
And I would say internet got 100 points and TV got 15 points.
Wow.
Because when you're on a network, number one, I don't own any of it. I have very little say. The producers, although we did have quilting producers, and I'm still good friends with them, so I want to be real careful, but a lot of the producers didn't know the industry. They do now. I mean, they did. And then you're always at the whim of, are you going to be canceled?
Right.
And so,
right.
It's terrible, but it is what it is. And when I was canceled, the head of programming from HGTV called me up and talked to me for 45 minutes. That doesn't happen. And so, I mean, I am so grateful for the experience. It ended so classy. I mean, it was wonderful. But so then we brought back, and to go on, we brought Martin Favre, president of Bernina USA, Gail, director of education. It's all changed now, to La Vida. And we put together a presentation, or Ricky did, because I didn't even know how to do PowerPoint at that point. A presentation on, will you write us a fluffy check, and we're going to the internet, and we're going to deliver on the internet. And Martin Favre said, and this was the golden thing. What are you going to do to bring them back day after day?
Right.
And Ricky said, I'm sitting there looking at Ricky, go, I don't know. What do you say? And he goes, well, write a quilt story. And the next day, Martin said, I'm in. It's crazy. It's crazy.
That same period of time. It's that 2006 to 2008 period when things are just shifting in ways that nobody knows. And
yeah.
I mean.
And then we worked with my old boss at HGTV. She came on board. She had another friend who was in the Chicago area, and she came on board. And in the beginning, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? I mean, are we making a ton of money? Oh no, because it all goes back into it. But what it gives us is exposure. So that's fantastic. Okay. In fact, we're not really making any money, but it gets out, it feeds the animals. And I just found an article, it's the same thing on PBS. It feeds the other things that you're doing.
Right, it creates the fan base that allows you to use that fan base for teaching and other things that, and that's so critical. That building of that fan base is huge now.
So I said to not my HGTV person, but the other person, I said, I don't know. I mean, this was probably in 2009, so it's very early on. I said, I don't know if they came back and said, HGTV or whomever, do you want to do a show? Right. And she looked at me and she said, that would be going backwards. Really? And people were really angry and really furious and all of that. But what do you do? It is.
That's just not what the world is anymore.
It is.
About how do you, so you're super lovely. You were even lovely to me. I just came up and said
oh,
you were so kind. And my quilting army has harassed you a couple times too. They've been like, you have to come on. So, and you're always very, very kind. How, that's hard to do. I mean, it's nice to be, people are lovely and it's easy, but also fan bases are challenging. So how has that changed? I mean, you've been doing it a long time. How do you manage that? And does it just feel comfortable or? I would imagine that your life is a bit off.
Well, I'll tell you, in real life, it's totally normal. And so it's only when I'm out, like Houston or whatever. And people are so kind. The only time in Livermore, I mean, I've been recognized a couple times, but the classic was I had, when you had your big wisdom teeth pulled out or whatever, and I had a big, huge, bloody thing in my mouth, and I'm like going, okay, I can go to the post office. Oh, God. I was right. Someone goes, oh, can I have your picture? No, go away. So I don't fancy myself I fancy myself as being at the right place at the right time. I mean, I am nothing special. And I really, truly believe that. I'm just was at the right place at the right time. And if you, what do you want? My husband said, huh?
Is this live or edited?
I don't know.
No,
it's my husband.
We're not, hi, husband. No, you're good. You can interrupt. Hi.
Hi. What do you want to say?
Well,
I thought the window.
Hey.
Oh, here we go. Oh, God, here we go.
Yeah, this is awesome. Hi.
Hi.
I'll pay you later.
Yeah. No, part of it is she's saying all this is serendipitous, and some of that is true. Yeah. But you have to be a person willing to receive it and do something with it.
Yeah.
And so she probably didn't tell you that one year she took every penny she made, came back home, rented the local TV studio, and said, if I'm going to do this in front of the whole world, I need to do it right. And she hired people to teach her how to do it.
That's
Spent
amazing.
everything that she did in that year.
That's amazing.
Because she always had the standard.
We don't believe her when she says it's just luck and serendipitous. We know it's much.
Well, but I cannot tell you how many people you approach and they approach me and say, well, I want to do this, and I say, well, then get me that, and they don't.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah, it's follow through and commitment are really important. When you get the opportunity to really follow through and be strong.
Right.
And it don't, as
This
anyone
is
who's
my
into
husband.
this knows.
For everybody who's listening, this is my husband. We've been married a while. He wants to keep it there.
But it's not easy getting on planes all the time.
No.
It's not easy going and being. I remember this didn't happen to Alex, but I remember one story where a traveling teacher had to go into a person's home, and above the bed was a snake.
God. The headboard was a snake. I mean, like in a terrarium or whatever they're called. Are they called terrariums?
Yeah,
oh,
jeez. Second, that is not cool. That is not cool. So how has the quilting industry, how has the quilting life, the quilting world impacted on who you are? Like, and having a wife that is, traveling and so public, like, how does that affect, like, you didn't really know that going into the marriage, right? Like, so.
No, I knew her when. Yeah. Yes, she, so all of this coming together really worked out very well.
Yeah.
Even though she started traveling while the kids were in, high school?
Yeah, but Jean Wells said, don't do that unless you want to be a grandma.
Yeah, but
Valerie Wells' mom said that. I can travel. No.
Yeah.
Okay, got that memo.
But it was nice because she asked us once, was she gone all the time? Well, the fact is she would travel almost every month, but it would be for X number of days, and then she was home. Yeah. And so we were able to go and oversample at Costco until she got back. And so it worked out in our lives very well.
Well, I'm going to say, I'm going to tell you probably one of the things I'm most proudest of is my daughter. Because she was able to watch me and not be mad at me for being gone, but understanding you can do whatever you want to do. And that kid has done she has rocked it, okay? And the only reason I'm not saying my son, who I adore too, that's expected of males. But what she has done, my daughter, and see, that's your whole generation. I mean, she's rocking it. I'm just rocking it. And that was not of our generation. I mean, that's one reason I love Eleanor Burns. I mean, oh my God, her story. You've talked to her, right?
No, I haven't gotten to her yet.
Yeah. You need to, her story is amazing. She is an amazing, amazing woman.
Well, I think it's so important that I traveled a lot when my kid was really little for my job. And I felt like it was an important role model. I also felt like it was important dad's time. That without me there, they were just fine. Like they had their own routine. As I said, over sample at Costco. And that's right? That really is that moment of like, it's good when moms go away sometimes.
Well, and then the other thing is, okay, so now she lives 2 miles from us. Okay, my son's in LA, so this can't really happen with him, but like a kid will get sick, let's just say, and it was natural to ask grandpa and grandma, but she will not ask me for that because she knows I can't get sick. Like if it's before Houston and all that,
right.
She understands it and gets it. And to me, that is huge.
Right, that's love. That's supportive and kind.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that, and I don't know if this is happening in your generation, is that Alex worked from home. So that meant you don't work.
Right.
And so people would come over or they'd ask you to do favors, etc. They would never ask of somebody who was going 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But because you were at home, even though you were working 10 hours, it's, they say, well, you're home, therefore you're not working.
And how do you deal with that? Like, how do you say to people, like, I'm actually working, right?
Well, it's real easy. You don't have friends. My friend base is really small.
Friends that understand that are not going to ask you for favors. Right?
I've got, if you're my best friend, I've got some really close friends. You are a low maintenance friend. If you're a high maintenance friend, rear view mirror, just like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the lovely part is if you're so busy, they just don't, like, they sort of get tired of waiting in line for your time. So,
See, as an accountant, I could always say to someone, I'm doing payroll, and then they would leave me alone. But it's harder for someone in
the creatives.
the creatives. But Alex also has always known who she is, and that's something she's probably wouldn't say out loud, but she always has been an ambassador for quilting. She's never claimed to be Sharon Schomburg. She wants people to come in and love what she loves, and that's been her mission.
Yeah, that's it.
That's really great. And that core, that knowing what your brand, I'm a trademark, I do trademark and copyright, and so I always put them back into the long term. But in terms of like knowing your brand, knowing your message, knowing who you are is so core to like all of us as humans. But also if you're building a brand on who you are as a business, that's really important because then you're all over the map and people don't really know who you are. And
so let me tell you something interesting as far as that goes. Back in the day, and I made a quilt, and it was an iconic quilt. It was in Quilts, the first one that was published by Diane and Laura. And all of a sudden, it's in an ad, that quilt. But it's not that quilt. It's from a fabric manufacturer. It's not that quilt. Oh, a little bit has been changed. Just a little bit. Like the inner border. And I looked at it and I'm thinking, okay, I've been ripped off. Let's start with that.
Right.
And then I thought, it's not worth the fight. It's not worth it. And lo and behold, I ended up working with that company down the road.
And did you say anything when you started working with them?
No, because my friend Mimi that I went to college with, I've got a lot more I got a lot more great ideas down the pike. I don't have to sweat that.
So we interviewed Tula Pink, and she said the same thing. She said when people rip her off, I think her brother had said, "You're already on to the next thing. They can't catch up with you." It's like, I interview pattern makers, and they're very, especially the young ones, especially like mid-career, like they've had some success, they're making some money off their patterns, and then people are swiping them. They have a very hard time letting go, and I'm not sure copyright is really not going to protect. We know it's not going to protect them really, right? And maybe a cease and desist letter or a scary letter from an attorney, maybe. But what do we say to them? They're so stressed, the pattern makers, and all the free patterns, and like they feel like they're getting squished, and they want to make a living at pattern making. And I don't know if you can make a living at pattern making. I don't think you can either. No, I think it's a combination of a whole bunch of stuff, patterns and teaching.
So Todd Hensley, who is an owner of C&T with his brother, C&T Publishing, when my first book came out a million years ago, I was going to go buy a boat, or whatever. And I looked at my royalty check and I'm like going, you got to be kidding me. Right. And Todd said, Alex, and I will say this to any young designer that's listening, it's not a matter of one thing, it's a matter of 20 things, and keeping all those balls up in the air, and they all feed and bounce off of each other. You're not going to make it on one thing. You are not going to make it on one thing.
Right. It's complicated. And do you think that the personal appearances is an important part of what you do, teaching at places, or it seems like that's a critical part of how the economics of the system that people want to see you, and there's only one of you. So I don't know how you do that exactly.
Well, I've been in a weird space the last couple of years, dealing with two parents with Alzheimer's and only one now. And so I would get a call when I'm somewhere. I'm like, they were living at home. And so I've kind of pulled back on what I was doing. And so now I'm trying to re-entry back into it. Fortunately, I've got the platform with Quilter Select. But going out, absolutely, you got to do it. You got to do it.
Yeah. So it's that combination, and the social media presence or internet presence, and it's just a really challenging, it's an interesting and fun game, but to watch you all work, it's a lot of work. You got to make work. It's not a like chilling, hanging out kind of, there's a lot going on.
Well, I'll get out of your way. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and the guy's so who was that? Yes. Thank you.
That was just
when I get off, he'll go, you should have said blah, blah, blah. I go, so come in and say it.
That was great. Thank you so much for having him too.
Sure.
That's great. So let's start. The last bit we'll ask is about intellectual property. So how important is intellectual property? You've done contracts. You've done big contracts. You've done lots of different things in your life. Tell us a little bit about that side of your world and what's important to you, or what experiences you've had that you're willing to share.
So I always say the bigger the contract, the more that company's been in trouble by somebody, and I mean, the bigger the contract, oh God. There was one company that came to me and wanted me to do something, and in the contract it said I could do nothing on the internet without going to them first. And I said, I am not going to sign that. And they said, well, exit out. Well, I could exit out, but if I sign it, then every other sheep is going to say, well, Alex did it, I can do it.
Right.
So my publisher, I just trust. I mean, I just trust. There's a couple things that are a little different on my contract. Then R&K, that's Quilter Select. It was a very simple contract. If it looks super scary, I will have a lawyer look at it. Oh, my daughter-in-law's a lawyer too.
That helps.
But people also will say, well, what do you think about this, that, and that? And within the industry, and I say, that's why there's copyright lawyers. It's a very complex issues.
It is. And I imagine that you also know from your contracts what's fair and what isn't, because you've done it now for a while, so that you know what you're expecting from a contract, and that helps a lot. But I think for new people, it must be a bit of a challenge to sort of.
It would be scary. I mean, what I would do is if I had a book contract or whatever, I would have somebody look at it. Now, my husband has pretty good legal eyes. I don't. I have dyslexia, so I'm like all over the place, But no, it's worth reading, because they'll put little things in there that maybe you should not be agreeing to.
Yeah, right. It's true.
It's true.
And sometimes they don't even realize the implication of what they're asking, like the internet clause, because they're like, you're keeping me from doing exactly what I want me to.
What I do.
Right? Like,
yeah.
And sometimes it's contracts where, like, you really don't want Alex to ask every time she goes on the internet for permission. Like, do you know what that means? Like,
right. Another contract
today,
Another contract. I'm trying to think what. Oh, when I was with HGTV, any endorsement they had to approve of. I get it. I understand it. And so, yeah, when Bernina wanted to play with me, they were like, yeah, that's a really respectful company. I mean, I guess they didn't want me to be doing stripping boas or something. I mean, they wanted to make sure I stayed clean. Like Stormy Daniels. Oh God. I'm sorry. We just dated that. And then when the show was over, there was a non-compete clause. And that was like for a year or so. So that hadn't crossed my mind, so then I think I became more aware of contracts and what am I signing, et cetera, et cetera.
Those non-compete clauses really do keep you from doing things, which is really interesting, isn't it? So interesting.
But that's okay, because my friend Joan Wolfram, the one I go away with every year, she said, look, you are in the middle of when I got canceled, she said, look, keep your mouth shut and your eyes open for a year.
You had a non-compete clause that still was applicable when they canceled you? That's craziness, right?
Maybe I should have gone to a lawyer.
But you were saying, like, they said, no, we're not going to continue the show, but you can't compete with us, even though we're not going to pick you up for another season.
Well, it was like, 9 months or 10 months, or, whatever.
That seems crazy to me. But I think LA and the whole, I mean, not just LA, but all of that stuff is that,
But that's Knoxville, Tennessee.
Well, I'm just saying, like, that whole, you sign what they have a lot of power. You sign what you sign because you don't really have the power, particularly when it's your first show. You can't be like.
And I would do it again in a heartbeat with every single thing in place. I mean, it was a fantastic experience.
And you can't be like, you don't have any negotiating power at that point anyway. It's a funny idea. Like,
Right.
we don't want you again, but you can't. Nobody else can have you either. It's very kind of, a 3-year-old temper tantrum or something.
Don't let the door hit you in the butt. And it was real. I'll tell you something real funny. Oh, God. When that guy called me up, Michael, from HGTV, I said, Michael, I get it. I mean, I was on like 11 years. Come on, that's huge, And I said, but I want you to know you're going to have a real problem on your hands. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, twofolds. I said, number one, you have the lady that sits there and watches it with her coffee in the morning. It's part of their routine, I said, and secondly, I said, stores. I mean, it really fed a lot of stores. Simply Quilts did. It fed a lot of stores. And you're going to be taking money out of these people's hands. And I think I said too, and plus you don't want to piss off menopausal women with rotary cutters. But anyways, he said, well, could you do something to help us so it doesn't turn into this? And I said,
no. Good for you. No. It's your problem. You created the problem.
It's your problem.
That's right. Good for you.
So.
That's really good. That's really good. It's so important. Man, the world is odd, isn't it? Well, I have to tell you, this is the most delightful hour. I'm just thank you so much for this. This is so great. This is so great.
Come see me in Houston. Are you going to be there for festival or market?
I am there the whole 12 days. The whole 12 days. And we have a booth. We have a booth. I know. It's exhausting. For me, it will be my second time. And also I know lots of people know. I know, but it is the center of it all, don't you think? I mean, it's like, and both sides are so different. Now, what will you be? Will you be there the whole time as well?
Yep.
The whole time. See, there you go. It is by that when you realize, I only went once last year, but I went the whole time last year. There's this moment when you realize that like you've all used up and festival is just starting. That moment of like, we have to do this again for 5 days. I don't know how that happens. I just don't. It's a marathon.
Well, I am so glad like John is there.
Yeah.
We stay at the Embassy Suites. They have free breakfast, free cocktail hour. Oh, okay, can't be too bad.
It's great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I really want to understand where this whole journey is going to be taking you. Okay, I want to know the big picture.
Right. Well, I think the big picture is a couple of things. First, for the big picture, there's 3 parts. One is I think that the quilting industry can teach law a lot. Like all the assumptions that we make in law, I'm finding they're not accurate. So that's my side of it, right? And so, who do we want to be as a quilting industry? We have to make those decisions ourselves and as a community. It isn't just laws going to come. It's not the police that you read the red light, but that who are we? Who do we want to be? Who do we want to support? Your dollars go towards who you want to support. So that's really important. That's the message of we make the world we make, and so we need to figure out what that is. At least that's what I feel about it. Well, thank you for your time today. It's huge.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So this is Elizabeth Townsend Guard. You've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. We want to hear from you. Join our army, our quilting army. Go to our Facebook page. Suggest people to be interviewed. Suggest yourself to be interviewed. We are excited to hear from you. But most importantly, I hope you get a chance to quilt today.